This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today it is March 11th, 2024. I'm traveling again today. I'll probably be traveling for a good bit here in March. So we'll be doing the show remotely. And thank you for bearing with me. I can't always control all the scenery, so here we have another hotel room. And I want to cover quite a bit today. Thank you for joining us at thetruthcentral.com. Join me on X at Corsi Jerome #1. And join me in Substack at jeromecorsiphd.substack.com. Now, the big news today is that my book on the JFK assassination is published today. And I'm very pleased with this book. It is, I think, a definitive book. And I think it's going to be shocking once we get the word out to the nation. It's going to take us a little bit of time to get the word out about this book, given all of the suppression in the media that we've got. But what the book demonstrates is it's a forensic analysis of the JFK assassination that I've done with Dr. David Mantik. Now, I've been working with David Mantik on and off for a couple of years, but I decided to really get very serious with it. And what we've done is we've had an opportunity here to put together over a 500-page book, which is about as comprehensive as you can get. Now, who is David Mantik? He's a PhD in physics, and he has a MD in radiation oncology. That's a very specialized field. Radiation oncology is the looking at Xrays for cancer patients. And he's been doing this for over 40 years. Now, David Mantik is known and very well known among the JFK community. In fact, he appears on many of the various DVDs you see or the features on the JFK assassination, including Oliver Stone's recent DVD, which was JFK Revisited. And Dr. Mantik appears in that. Dr. Mantik has seen the X-rays of JFK's skull that are in the National Archives. He's seen them more than anyone else. Now, Chris, if you'll go over to the Amazon, my producer, go over to the Amazon listing because it's got a better picture of the cover. Or just want to pick up a good picture of the cover. And we have it here in if you just click on the cover and enlarge it. It's on Amazon sale today. Just kind of click on the book, on the book cover there, and it will enlarge on the Amazon. There you go. If you can put that full screen, Chris, for a minute. I want to show everybody the skull X-ray. May be hard to see here, but what you see there's 3 shots to the head. And what the X-rays show, Dr. Mantik went in he did detailed millimeter by millimeter. That's the X-ray. And then you can see JFK's head from the Zapruder film. He did minute optical density measurements. That's great, Chris. There you go. That's right. Optical density measurements are a measure of the amount of light coming through an X-ray. And they tell you an enormous thing about the X-rays. And Dr. Mantik has been brilliant on this. And I wanted to write this up so that it can be read by the public and understood. Now, first of all, you'll see there's a big white patch in the back of the X-ray. You can see that right there where the yellow arrow is. There's a big white patch. All 3 of the X-rays that are in the National Archives have been altered to mask what were signs of front entry wounds. And there are 3 X-rays. All 3 are faked. And this is pretty shocking because it means government involvement in faking the evidence. What is clear from the X-rays, if you see the blue arrow at top, a shot hit JFK right at the forehead, the right forehead at the hairline. Now, if you see that blue arrow, Chris, you can trace it with your mouse. There's a fragment trail that goes across the top of Kennedy's skull. Right there's the blue arrow where it hits. And go to the X-ray, Chris. Over here to the X-ray itself. Blue line. Then you can see the debris. Look at all the little white dots in a straight line. Point them out. There you go. Right along that line. Those are fragments from a bullet that entered at the right forehead. And at the back of the skull, you'll notice the skull is intact. There is no exit wound right there, which means that was a front entry shot. And it looks like the angle could have been either from the grassy knoll, or it depends on the angle of Kennedy's head. It may have come from the other side of the grassy knoll across Elm Street, which would have been the south side of Elm Street, across the street, to the left of Kennedy. Another shot hit Kennedy right by the ear. You can see the word entered there. There's an entry right there that it came in right in the temporal bone, right by the ear, and it blew out the back of his head. That's where this white patch here is designed to draw your attention from the blowout. But if you look here, Chris, now go to where the yellow arrow is. It was a shot from the back, hit at the back of his head. So these shots were nearly simultaneous, but the book pinpoints them down to the Zapruder frames in which the shots occurred and gives you the evidence of where the shots came from. This means that Oswald, number one, Oswald was not the sole shooter. Number two, there was at least one shooter, maybe two in the grassy knoll. There was at least one shooter on the other side of the triple underpass by the railroad bridge, because there was a shot that came through the windshield. The shot through the windshield caused JFK to have an injury in his throat. That's what he's reacting there to, with his arms going up to his throat. That shot through the windshield hit before the headshots. He also had a shot in the back, which probably another missed shot, was shrapnel. No bullet was ever found from the neck wound or from the back shot. Back shot was, again, probably a little piece of shrapnel that went in and hit in the back of his back. Now, the one that wasn't found was the throat wound. That was never found any lead at all. Now, this means that there were multiple shooters and bullets were missed. So we don't know where all the shooters were, but from these three shots in the skull X-ray, it's clear he was hit from the grassy knoll. He was hit from the other side of the triple underpass, from up by the railroad yard, and he was hit from a low angle from behind, which was probably the Dow Tex building. It does not look like there's clear evidence anyone was shooting from the 6th floor of the Texas School Depository, where Oswald was supposed to have been. But again, I say, with the missed shots, we don't have a comprehensive view of all the shooters. What this book shows is that it is absolutely impossible that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gun shooter. In fact, if the 6th floor window is where Oswald was, no shot from that location hit JFK's head. The three headshots were low angle from the rear. And that means not the Texas School Book Depository 6th floor window. It was from these two that hit on the right side. The head means the shot were both frontal shots. Now, the book is comprehensive, and it's got a lot of diagrams. It's got a lot of charts. And the analysis of X-rays is a logarithmic function. So there's a lot of appendices in this book, which give you all the technical detail. We wanted to write this book so it really is pretty much science, true measurement of science. The optical density measurements have been confirmed by Dr. Chesser, the ones that David Mantik did, because they're done with a little densitometer, a little machine that measures millimeter by millimeter the amount of light coming through an X-ray. It permits you to see exactly what you've seen, what you're looking at. The front of JFK's head did have a blowout from the back wound. And you can see the empty spaces at the back of the head, which were reflective of a blowout from the rear shot, which entered right about the knob in the back of your head, the EOB, which is called the external occipital protuberance. The medical science here is what permits us to see, A, that the government forged the evidence, and the government was covering up evidence from the very beginning. The Parkland Hospital doctors all said that Kennedy was shot from the front. And when the body got to Bethesda for the autopsy, the government had a problem, and that they had to alter the wounds. in order to create the evidence of shots from behind. In fact, the only shots from behind, which contradicts a lot of the evidence on the scene, and it most importantly contradicts this optical density information from the X-rays. Now, the book also discusses how the Kennedy's body had pre-autopsy surgery at Bethesda, and the doctors who did the autopsy went in and actually altered the wounds. So what was seen in the autopsy was not the way Kennedy's body looked the first minutes after it was shot. This is a shocking story. And I think the major impact of this story is to say that we now know for a fact for 60 years, the government has been lying. Government's been still withholding files. Even President Trump was convinced not to release the JFK final files. For 60 years, our government has said that Lee Harvey Oswald was the sole shooter, when the truth is the CIA, the military, were involved in the shooting. This was a coup d'etat. If Kennedy was shot from the front, if that evidence was erased by our government or altered, we've been lied to for 60 years, we can see that the CIA is extremely dangerous. Our military organizations, the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, are completely now being operated by globalists, as they were in the 1960s. Allen Dulles, who was head of the CIA at that time, and was in fact a globalist. He spent World War II in Bern, Switzerland, and he did everything he could possibly do to work with the Nazi Germans and help them get their money out of Nazi Germany. In fact, he brought over one whole group of the German Gestapo and made it part of the CIA. What I've been doing, writing about this, is my second book on the JFK assassination. Chris will show you the first in a minute once he looks for it. If you just look up Jerome Corsi plus JFK, you'll see both of my books on Amazon. Right now, the book is only on Amazon. We got it out as quickly as we could. We may go to a press and print some. The audiobook and the Kindle book will take a little bit more time because they're very complicated to produce. We have a lot of diagrams, a lot of evidence in this book, and we thought was imperative was as quickly as we could to get in front of the American people in a form you can read the fact that JFK was shot from the front, indisputable evidence, which shows that there was a government conspiracy. He was shot by a crossfire. People like Jim Marrs have been for decades writing about this. There's a whole group of heroes who have done extraordinary work. There's my first book, Who Really Killed Kennedy. That book gets more into the politics of why Kennedy was killed. He was killed because Kennedy wanted to make peace. He wanted to reach out during the Cuban Missile Crisis when the Joint Chiefs wanted to go to a nuclear war with Russia. I'm going to explain that in a minute. Jack Kennedy prevented it. Cuban Missile Crisis, as you'll recall, 1962, especially those who were alive at the time and aware of what was going on, was precipitated by the fact that Khrushchev put nuclear missiles in Cuba 90 miles from the U.S. coast. What that meant was that we were in sudden danger of a nuclear attack from Russia through Cuba, where we would not have time to retaliate. We'd have time, perhaps even to launch our first strike, depending on how quick the strike had been detected. The government of the United States, of course, went into overdrive to deal with this. And it was also a long story, which I describe in the book, from the Bay of Pigs, which Kennedy knew was going to be a failure. And he blocked the B-26s from going in to rescue the Cubans who had hit the beach in the Bay of Pigs. It was a disaster. Kennedy took responsibility for the disaster. But Kennedy was pulling out of Vietnam. And the Joint Chiefs had Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay had been the general who firebombed Dresden. He firebombed Europe with massive firestorms that sucked the air, the oxygen out of these cities, and people died from asphyxiation as well as burning to death. Then Curtis LeMay firebombed Japan and dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan. He wanted to go to nuclear war with Russia. He used the Cuban Missile Crisis. He wanted to invade and cause a war, because our Joint Chiefs believed we had tactical nuclear superiority over Russia. We could absorb a first strike. We could eliminate Russia from the world. We could obliterate them at that time. That's what the Joint Chiefs thought. Jack Kennedy reached out to Khrushchev with a back channel, and neither one wanted to go to war. But the problem was they were both military, wanted to go to war. And so Kennedy and Khrushchev worked out a solution with a blockade, and Russia pulled the missiles out of Cuba. Kennedy also agreed to pull out missiles that Eisenhower had put into Turkey, which was really the precipitant of why Khrushchev put the missiles in Cuba. Kennedy wanted peace. He wanted a world in which we would not have what we have today, which is these maniacs thinking they're creating their globalist world, and they're going to throw us all into World War III in order to destroy capitalism and create their transhuman utopia. Been writing about this in a trilogy of books. My first book is the truth about global warming, energy, global warming, and climate change, where I said the left and these globalists lie. The second book, which is on the neo-Marxist, cultural Maoism, and anarchy, shows why they lie. This whole woke ideology, which comes out of communism, and now we're conducting a cultural revolution. Chris will show the titles of these two books. It's like I've written one book in 5 different books. But the point is, you've got to understand, but this book got a very, very salacious review. I'd like you to read the review, because this book hits the demons so hard that they're trying to screech back and get the book not read. If you read this book, you're going to see that this neo-Marxist agenda of critical race theory, which dominates the universities, this gender confusion, is meant to destroy America. And it's well along the way. I'm going to go to a couple of other next stories, which kind of put my theme together today. My theme is that the Kennedy assassination, now that we know that it was frontal shots and that it was a conspiracy, the government was involved in the cover-up, the government was involved in engineering the assassination. Now we also can see the reality that our CIA, our Pentagon, the Department of Defense wants to go with NATO to war with Russia. And I'm asking the question, I'm going to be writing about it this week, and I'm pushing this question: is the October surprise nuclear war? Are these demons, and I do mean satanic demons of the left, who are orchestrating all of this incredible woke insanity, willing to go to war with Russia in order to prevent Donald Trump from being president? If they think that Donald Trump has become so popular, he's going to win by a margin where it's too big to cheat, the only next solution is to cancel the election. You cancel the election with a nuclear war. Would they go to that extreme? Yes, because they're depopulationists. They don't care if billions of people die. There's 2 more articles that I've covered today, and I want to focus on them because they prove the point, I believe. If you recall, when we had the back channeling with Tucker Carlson doing the interview with Putin in Moscow, which was back channeled in order to get him to come there so that Putin and Medvedev could deliver some messages. I've reported on this before in the Truth Central, and I'll be writing about it this week. Medvedev has been signaling that if Ukraine war expands by NATO entering it with direct NATO troops, and the United States supplies the weaponry, and we enter with troops, there will be World War III, and it will be nuclear. Medvedev has said this numerous times. He said it again last week. Now, the first story is that France and Germany are currently planning for a conventional war and a Western intervention, a NATO intervention in Ukraine, despite the leaders' denials over the last 2 weeks. This is getting to be known. The debate is that the French President Macron is saying whether NATO should conventionally intervene. He wants it to conventionally intervene So France, the Baltic states, and Poland want to have non-combat deployments. In other words, training missions, but yet they're military on site in Ukraine fighting against the Russians in Ukraine. Germany is saying, well, this shouldn't happen at all. But Germany, it was an intercepted telephone conversation last week where the German military were planning and deciding, they were targeting, and it was revealed through this conversation that the British and French troops are helping Ukraine target control the destruction of this Crimean bridge. And Germany is thinking of providing these Taurus missiles, cruise missiles, to Ukraine to do the job, possibly even missiles that would be powered by, controlled by German advisors on the scene. So Germany is going in a direction of building this fortress Europe, resuming its long-lost superpower trajectory. They're saying through defense. They're talking about militarizing NATO. Okay, the UK is not sitting in the sidelines. The UK has already sent in advisors. They're looking to send in more. And there is a re-engineering of this Greek-Ukrainian corridor or a logistical route, because Poland is not really wanting to accept Ukrainian grain any longer because it undercuts Polish grain producers. So the point is, there are active steps being taken in NATO right now to think about going to war. And the second story I want to cover is that the war maneuvering, in fact, focusing on this intercepted conversation, it's not clear who intercepted the conversation, but that was being released by Russia in order to get this into the media. But the point is that the Western press refused to report this intercepted conversation. They were saying, well, it really says, it's a failure of intelligence that this got intercepted. They didn't discuss what was being the substance of the telephone conversation, was that NATO is thinking about actually upping their involvement in Ukraine to more direct involvement in a war with Russia. And that affirms to me that Medvedev's warnings are based on Russian intelligence that NATO is planning and considering not letting Zelensky lose and going in and making sure Putin is defeated. Now, this is insanity because NATO's been trying to come to war with Russia since Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton received money from Pinochet, who was a Ukrainian oligarch. She put it in the Clinton Foundation, which was Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State and Soros organized one of these color revolutions, the Maidan Revolution in 2014 in Ukraine, which deposed Yanukovych, who was a Russian-supported, duly elected president. Yanukovych, his name was Yanukovych, of Ukraine, duly elected but Russian-supporting. These two provinces, Donetsk and Donbass, on the eastern part of Ukraine, are Russia's access to the Atlantic Ocean through the Black Sea. Russia is not going to get those gone. Also, we moved now into NATO, into Finland and Sweden are both coming into NATO, which will deny Russia's access and make it more difficult to get to the Baltic Sea through Finland, which is the other route that Russia has into the Atlantic. That was this point of Putin's history lesson to make it clear how extremely important this was. So I think it's extremely important, and hand to God, my book on JFK that I've been working on now for years is out this weekend at the same time about the CIA and the Pentagon having a secret war to kill Kennedy, to keep the Cold War going so that the arms manufacturers could make more money, and with the attempt of going to war against Russia as their primary theme. And it hasn't stopped. Today, with the woke, the globalists are trying to use this neo-Marxism to destroy capitalism, to destroy our society, to make America weak and confused, generals and admirals in dresses, so that when we get NATO now to actually get directly involved in the war under the theme we've got to keep Putin from expanding into Europe, it'll be World War III, and we could have nuclear war before the end of the year as our October surprise. Now, I know this sounds far-fetched, almost hard to imagine, but I want you to understand that everything I'm saying here today is based in fact and reporting. And unless you put these things together, you're not going to get the full picture. I'm going to ask Chris to comment, and I'm going to wrap up. Chris, your thoughts today?
Oh, if you think about this, the EU has been trying to provoke Russia for quite some time. The invasion of Ukraine just happened to be an excuse for them to do so, and they can stamp up the idea that they can bring in or sort of close Russia in through the Baltic nations, and of course through soon to be letting in Ukraine as far as NATO is concerned. Problem we're having here is NATO, which was supposed to be a defensive treaty, has now become now I'm not saying militarily offensive, but a diplomatically offensive organization.
Well, now we're in a situation, I think. I'm going to go to Archbishop Vigano, who I've been following very, very closely. He was the papal nuncio for the Vatican, the United States, until he began criticizing Pope Francis. So Archbishop Carlo Vigano was removed from that position and has now begun writing. And he gave a statement to a private international group that I'm working with. It's on Rumble. You can see this, Doctors for COVID Ethics, and it's on Rumble. We'll start posting a few of them on the True Central, so you can follow them as well. But what the Archbishop is saying is that for the past 4 years, we've been witnessing the implementation of a criminal plan of world depopulation. He's right. And he's saying that it's a neo-Malthusian project of mass extermination, which is unprecedented in the history of the human race, that we're seeing this woke penetrate all of our institutions. And it's a crime against God and a crime against humanity. So Bishop Vigano writes, it's not just money that's the motive for this crime, but the lust for enrichment motivating many is the will. In addition, behind this lust for enrichment, what motivates many is the will to power of the subversive Davos elite, which aims to destroy the current order and establish their new world order. That's what's going on. So you get a combination of the Agenda 30, the Rockefeller Foundation, the World Economic Forum's Great Reset Project, and what Archbishop Vigano calls is a global coup d'etat. So it must be denounced by us. Those responsible must be tried and judged by an international court. Above all, it's necessary for us to understand it's an all-out war against humanity. It's not motivated just by the lust for power, but by a religious theological reason. This reason is Satan's hatred of God, Satan's hatred of creation, hatred of man, who's deemed in the image and likeness of God. Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, George Soros, and the hundreds of servants whom they blackmail in governments all hate God. They hate life, which only God can give. They hate love, which comes only from God. They hate peace, which can reign only where Christ reigns. As Tucker Carlson said a few days ago, we're facing people who serve Satan and the demons of hell, not as normal people worship and service God. In the end, God will win. And I hesitate to think what the judgment of God is going to mean here, but we're going to go through it. I trust that God did not create the human race to fail, and that I encourage people, Spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, we've got to get on our knees, we've got to pray, we've got to ask God to forgive us for letting all this evil come into the world. As many babies, millions since Roe v. Wade, being butchered, cut to pieces in the womb, a barbaric crime against God. taking out of our schools, out of our lives. Finally, we're getting some Supreme Court decisions removing God from our society. We've got to bring God back into our society and into our lives. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Monday, it's March 11th, 2024. I'm celebrating this day that my new book on the JFK assassination is published. It's available on Amazon and only on Amazon. It's a book you must read because it changes everything to know that Jack Kennedy was killed by crossfire and that we've been lied to by our government for 60 years. Government covering up its complicity. I'll be covering this book more through the next few days, and I'll be doing interviews on it. We're doing everything we can to get this book internationally known. Dr. Jerome Corsi will be back tomorrow. Thank you for joining us. God bless.